In this video, we delve into the heartbreaking and complex story of Kashmir, a region that has been plagued by violence and division for decades. From the rise of terrorism in the 1980s to the ongoing struggles of today, Kashmir's history is marked by political corruption, religious extremism, and the deep suffering of its people. Through the lens of Indian nationalism, we explore the causes behind the insurgency, the trauma endured by innocent civilians caught in the crossfire, and the role of both internal and external forces in fueling the conflict. Join us as we reflect on the painful journey of Kashmir, the need for peace, and the unyielding hope that one day the valley can heal. The story of Kashmir's struggle, its pain, and its cries for peace stretches far back into the past, beginning in the aftermath of the partition of India in 1947. For decades, the region has been torn between a desire for independence, the aspirations of its people, and the political forces both within and outside its borders. But the greatest and most tragic consequence of Kashmir's long history of conflict has been the suffering of its people, particularly the Kashmiri Pandits, who were brutally displaced from their homes, their lives forever altered by the violence and hatred that engulfed the region. The origins of terrorism in Kashmir, stretching from the 1980s to the present day, lie in a web of religious extremism, political corruption, and external influence, each playing its part in a tragedy that continues to unfold even today. In the 1980s, Kashmir was already a region fraught with tension, its people divided by loyalty to India, to Pakistan, or to the idea of an independent Kashmir. After the partition of India in 1947, Kashmir became the subject of a bitter territorial dispute between India and Pakistan, leading to several wars and an unresolved conflict that perpetually simmered. The 1980s marked a turning point, a time when the spark of militancy began to catch fire, fueled by both local grievances and foreign intervention. The root of the problem lay in the growing alienation of Kashmiris, especially after a series of events that shattered the fragile sense of trust between the people of the region and the Indian state. The most significant blow came in 1987 when the state elections were widely perceived to be rigged, with the ruling party using its influence to suppress the will of the people. For many Kashmiris, this election was the final straw, a symbol of the corrupt political system that ignored their voices and aspirations. The National Conference, NC, which had long been the dominant political party in Kashmir, was seen by many as a puppet of some external forces. Its leaders more interested in maintaining power than addressing the growing demands for political autonomy and justice. As the rigged elections unfolded, young people, particularly the youth, became increasingly disillusioned with the political process. Their frustration, amplified by years of neglect and a lack of political representation, pushed many toward a path of radicalization. At the heart of this growing unrest was the rise of religious extremism. The seeds of radicalization, initially promoted by Pakistan, found fertile ground in the Kashmir Valley. Pakistan, motivated by its own desires to weaken India, supported militant groups that espoused violence. These groups, initially composed of local Kashmiri youth who sought an independent Kashmir, began to shift their rhetoric and strategy, focusing not just on freedom, but on religious extremism. The violence was no longer about secular aspirations. It was only about religious extremism, an ideology that increasingly sought to define the struggle through a lens of religion rather than politics. This change in the nature of the insurgency turned Kashmir into a battlefield where innocent civilians were caught between the crossfire of political ambition and religious intolerance. By 1989, the insurgency in Kashmir had reached a violent crescendo. Armed groups such as the Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front, JKLF, and Hizbul Mujahideen began to operate openly, calling for either independence or integration with Pakistan. What followed was a wave of terror, where innocent civilians became the primary victims of violence. The situation became unbearable for many, especially the minority Kashmiri Pandits, who found themselves under constant threat. The Pandits, a small but significant Hindu community in the region, were suddenly seen as the enemy, their homes marked for destruction. For the Pandit community, it was a time of unimaginable horror. They were forced to flee their homes in the dead of night, leaving behind everything they had known, becoming refugees in their own land. Thousands of families were displaced, their lives shattered, and their sense of identity uprooted. The exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits in 1990 remains one of the darkest chapters in the history of the region. Forced to abandon their ancestral homes, the Pandits found themselves scattered across the country, many living in refugee camps, their once thriving culture now silenced. What they endured was unimaginable, their lives forever marked by the horrors of that time. For them, the violence was not just a political struggle. It was a religious war waged against their very existence. The images of burning homes, the cries of families torn apart, and the haunting memories of those who never made it out of the valley are etched in the collective memory of the Kashmiri Pandit community. Yet, despite the years that have passed, the plight of the Pandits remains largely forgotten in the broader narrative of Kashmir's conflict. Their suffering, their pain, and their desperate longing to return to their homeland continue to be ignored by both the corrupted politicians and the world at large. Sater. The role of corrupt politicians further exacerbated the already fragile situation in Kashmir. The political class, more concerned with personal gain than the welfare of the people, failed to address the growing discontent that was fueling the insurgency. The people of Kashmir, especially the youth, saw their leaders as disconnected from their struggles, more interested in maintaining their grip on power than in alleviating the suffering of the masses. This disillusionment with the political system was a significant factor that pushed many young Kashmiris into the arms of militant groups, who offered them an alternative, a chance to fight for their beliefs, even if it meant resorting to violence. Corruption within the political establishment, coupled with the widespread sense of betrayal felt by the Kashmiri people, helped create an environment where extremism could thrive. As the years passed, the insurgency in Kashmir evolved, with religious extremism continuing to play a dominant role. The region became increasingly militarized, with both security forces and militant groups engaging in fierce battles. The people of Kashmir found themselves trapped in a deadly cycle of retaliation and counter-retaliation. The innocent, as always, were the ones who suffered the most. Families were torn apart, lives were lost, and the hopes for a peaceful resolution seemed to slip further away with each passing day. The situation worsened in the 2000s as Pakistan continued to fuel the flames of violence in Kashmir, providing support to militant groups operating in the region. While India struggled to deal with its internal political problems, Pakistan saw the Kashmir conflict as an opportunity to weaken its neighbor. The rise of global terrorism and the involvement of international terrorist organizations in Kashmir further complicated the situation, as the region became a breeding ground for extremism. The innocent people of Kashmir, both Muslim and Hindu, paid the price for the geopolitical struggles between India and Pakistan. In recent years, the situation has become even more complex. The 2016 killing of Burhan Wani, a prominent militant leader, sparked widespread protests and unrest in the region. The violence escalated, and the Indian government responded with a heavy-handed approach, using military force to quell the unrest while upholding utmost control and temperance. The people of Kashmir, already disillusioned and frustrated, found themselves caught in a vicious cycle of violence, unable to escape the grip of terror. Meanwhile, the abrogation of Article 370 in 2019, a major step to establish peace in the region, which revoked the special status of Jammu and Kashmir, added another layer of complexity in deepening the sense of alienation among the local population and further fueling separatist sentiments fueled by separatist leaders. Religious extremism, political corruption, and foreign intervention have all played their parts in creating the tragic situation we see today in Kashmir. Yet, amidst all the violence, there is one thing that stands out: the desperate need for peace. The people of Kashmir, both Hindu and Muslim, have endured enough suffering. The families are torn apart, the lives lost, and the scars of the past cannot be erased, but the future can still be shaped. It is time for India, Pakistan, and the people of Kashmir to come together and find a path to peace, a path that respects the rights and aspirations of all communities in the region. The path to peace will not be easy. It will require the recognition of past wrongs, the willingness to forgive, and the courage to build a future free of violence. It will require political leadership that prioritizes the welfare of the people over power, and a commitment to ensuring that the voices of the Kashmiri people, including the Pandits, are heard. Most importantly, it will require the rejection of religious extremism, which has done nothing but fuel the fire of hatred and division. If there is to be any hope for Kashmir, it lies in the hands of those who are willing to embrace the values of humanity, tolerance, and peace. For the people of Kashmir, there can be no other way forward. Geset. As we conclude, it's clear that the Kashmir conflict is not just a political dispute, but a profound human tragedy that has affected generations. The pain of the Kashmiri Pandits, the loss of innocent lives, and the enduring struggles of all the people caught in the crossfire serve as a powerful reminder of the need for peace, understanding, and reconciliation. While the path ahead remains uncertain, it's essential that we work towards a future where dialogue and empathy replace violence and division. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and let me know the subject you want to know more about. Let's hope for a peaceful, harmonious, and prosperous future for Kashmir. Thank you for watching.